as a poet, you should be engaged in a very active way with the community because you're going to learn from that, but you're also going to meet other writers. Mm-hmm. You're going to find commonality. You're going to be working towards something together, right? Something that you share in common. That vibration is going to accrete and gather energy around it.
That was George Kalamaras sharing his advice to other writers. Stay tuned to hear more about George's journey as a writer on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. We'll be back after the intro. Welcome to Pages and Voices, the local author podcast, sponsored by the Allen County Public Library. This podcast is dedicated to featuring the works of talented authors within our community. Today's author guest is George Kalamaras. George, former Poet Laureate of Indiana from 2014 to 2016, is Professor Emeritus of English at Purdue University, Fort Wayne, where he taught for 32 years. He is the author of 24 collections of poetry, 15 full-length books, and 9 chapbooks, and he has published more than 1,350 poems in magazines and anthologies. In addition to his publications in the United States, his poems have appeared in print journals in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America, and have been translated into Bengali and Spanish. One of George's greatest loves is hound dogs. In fact, his most recent book of poems focuses entirely on hound dogs. George and his wife Marianne Kane, also a fellow writer and professor emeritus at Purdue Fort Wayne, have nurtured beagles in their home for nearly 30 years. First Barney, then Bootsy, and now Blazy. Welcome to the podcast, George.
Thanks, Meg. Great to be here.
Yes. We're going to begin with you sharing poems from your new book, What My Hound Dog is Scenting Through the Sloughgrass is a Way of Scenting Me, poems, which was released in December 2023. But first, I want to tell our listeners a little bit about the book. This lively new collection of poetry by George Kalamaras, former Poet Laureate of Indiana, is an intimate appreciation of hound dogs of all breeds and a Whitman-esque celebration of American life. Our companionship with dogs, and our attraction to wilderness, adventure, and contemplation. This gritty, swampy, woodsy volume attends to sensuous details. In his inimitable way, Kalamaras discovers in the backwoods of the American imagination enormous resources for spiritual sustenance. Hound dogs, with their woofling muzzles, lead us to the places where we may realize our deepest human and animal purposes. George, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for such a lovely introduction, too, Meg. I thought I'd read a poem from the book about growing up in the woods in northwest Indiana. And we lived, it'll come into the poem. I forget details, and sometimes I have to look back at the poems. But we lived about 4 miles from a town that had we called it a show back then, not a theater. We would go to a show. We wouldn't go to a film. We wouldn't go to a movie. We go to a show.
Okay.
So this poem deals with that, and you'll hear all kinds of stuff about hound dogs and my desire for hound dogs in the poem. And The name of the theater is the Palo. Friday nights at the Palo. We drive 4.5 miles south from Rural Route 2, Box 139B, to see a show at the Palo in Lowell. Yes, we said show back then, and not movie or film, as if something would be given us, revealed, opened inside. Those were the days of hound dogs and woods, of canary grass ringing in our throats, sassafras, sycamore, elm, all that Indiana growth bowing in the breeze, showing me how to revere the world. But Friday nights at the Palo's single screen and all the shows of the early 60s made me want a white horse to prance with Prince Valiant, or to have a 6-gun like Yul Brynner, Robert Vaughn, Steve McQueen, and their compadres in the Magnificent Seven. My grandmother's red and white 57 Ford Fairlane, with its own roaring horsepower, carrying us here to there, past Lake Dale, to watch Dr. Zhivago venture into winter vasts, to survive the Bolsheviks and love both the blonde and brunette parts of himself. How could a theater so small possibly house 500 seats? How could each seat, cramped in those days, hold our breath so large? We were there not only to see the show, but to breathe the prairie gusts of galloping horses in and out of one another. A flurry I'd bring home to my brother Sheltie, who'd wag and fluff his tail, and into my dream of having hound dogs one day to help me find myself in raccoon hollers. Who would run the woods with me the following morning, if not a redbone or blue tick? Who would bring me through the beckoning brome? What did the show show me of myself? Was the Palo part palace in disguise, even though it was simple, rectangular brick on Mill Street as you crossed the bridge into Lowell before Teen onto Commercial? Toggery Men's Store sat up the street from the thunderstorm of the bowling alley housed in the American Legion. I wanted a Davy Crockett musket with John Wayne at the Alamo, but didn't want to die there like he and Jim Bowie had, with Bowie wounded but throwing knives from the cot. I wanted a hunting camp in Kentucky with Daniel Boone staring across the Ohio into the dip of Indiana hills with a pack of ball-mouthed hounds. I wanted them to show me with their baying the marsupial whisks of possum wind pouched in midnight, a wind the show at the Palo blew into me and wanted me to breathe. How I could sit in and sift the theater's Friday dark as the projector clicked and flicked, just as the hounds I breathed into my future would one day lantern dance the moon. How such a small brick building just 4.5 miles south of our woods could show me each week how to be and not be myself, and how both together were the world.
Whew, that was awesome. My brain is going in a million different directions. It's like a little mini biography there of your life. I mean, people will read that and be like, I know how George was raised.
I guess so. Yeah.
And I also, what stands out to me is how great the names of those theaters from back then, the Rialto and the Palo. We don't name them like we used to.
No, we don't.
Dang it. So, George, I've gotten to know you over the past several years, and I personally know how important your hound dogs are to you. I've received beautiful personal photos of you with Blazy. I've met her on video calls. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about how your love affair with the hound dogs began?
Sure. I don't know the exact year, but as it sort of enters in that poem, I just remember having grown up in the woods, everybody had dogs. And there was something about hound dogs that just always attracted me. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because, well, they're a little bit like me. Which is they have a lot of get up and go, and they love to be social, but they really need their downtime. They love to snooze in front of the fire, in front of the wood-burning stove.
Well, that sounds like me, too. It really does.
Maybe like a lot of us, right?
Right.
So, there's just something so no frills, almost working class about a hound dog. It's just so Americana in many ways. And so I just, from an early age, fell in love with beagles especially. My grandfather had beagles. I didn't know that until many years later.
Okay.
He had kept beagles, and I just fell in love with beagles, and then blue tick hounds, of course, and red bone hounds. So I think that's probably how it all began.
This isn't a question I had thought of until just right now, but how old were you when you got your first one?
Barney.
How old were you?
Barney was a girl, by the way. And
okay.
We were not confused. We just loved the name.
Sure.
And we found out later that there had been a series of Barney Beagle books. But Marianne and I, my wife Marianne and I, we just liked the name Barney. Not till I was an adult.
Okay.
So it's really only been 30 years since I actually have had hound dogs.
Sorry, guys. So in this new book, are certain poems about certain dogs, or are all of the dog spirits kind of in all of the poems?
Do you mean certain real dogs, or do you mean certain breeds of dogs?
Like your dogs that you Barney and Bootsy and Blazy, are there certain poems that are about
That's a great question. Some are about particular dogs. So some are about Barney and Bootsy, but most are just about hound dogs in general and how they interface with our lives and our culture, our spiritual and psychological sense of the world. Some of the poems are based on a series of old photographs that I've collected over the years.
Oh.
Black and white photos from the AP Press and Acme, Detroit Free Press. In fact, that's how the whole project started, was that I was doing what's called an ekphrastic exercise, an ekphrastic poem, where I was writing a poem in response to a visual image. And I had a photograph of this hound dog. Wolf was his or her name, and the dog was on a witness stand in Michigan City, Indiana, and there was a custody battle over the dog by two hunters. I thought, it'd be interesting to try to enter this photo and see if I could imaginatively reanimate it, because it was from the 50s, and it was just such a powerful photo. And so I wrote it, and the poem was, I thought, pretty good. Actually, that poem's in the book. And so the next night I thought that was fun, and I had all these photos, so I pulled out another one. I thought, wouldn't this be interesting to write a poem about this photo? And so that's how the project actually began. And I had several of those. So those are particular hound dogs, right? Because they're normally named in the photos. From there, I just started branching off. I thought, I don't want to limit it to writing about the photos, because my imagination and my mind were just going all over the place. I had really ignited something. And I think that's a really good lesson for aspiring writers, too, to think that it might take some little thing that actually gets us into a project, and the project goes somewhere where we could never even have quite imagined.
How long did it take you to write the book?
I think it was about 5 years, maybe, give or take. I think somewhere around 5 years. I'm a really fast composer. I tend to write a lot. I'm a marathon runner when it comes to the process of a poem and a book. Because I'll look at a poem. When you write a poem, sometimes you think, oh, this is really happening. And then you'll pull it out a week later, a month later, several years later, and you go, it's sort of working, but there's something funky about the last stanza. Or there's something off to my ear about this word or this line break.
Sure.
So I'm a very slow, deliberate reviser. So it takes me a long time until I say, okay, this project, I think it's complete.
My next question, I feel like you sort of answered, but then maybe you might have some insight on it. So did you have them in your head beforehand, the ones that weren't about the photos, but the ones that are about the dogs that you have personally known in your life? Did you have some of that in your head?
It's a great question. No, not really, and not even about the photos, because I would approach a photo and I wouldn't necessarily base my poem on all the details. Like, the photo would have a tiny little caption, like the example I gave about this dog Wolf in Michigan City, Indiana.
It's a fascinating
And then
story.
I would just imaginatively move into it. I rarely plan a poem, any poem, in this book or in any of my books. I rarely plan a poem ahead of time, because it's sort of like trying to fit into this box, and it begins to limit the possibilities of my imagination. So I often begin a poem with language. In fact, I used to tell my students, there are at least two doors that you can walk into the making of a poem with. You can walk in the door of meaning, which is the question you just asked. Did I have the meaning kind of in my mind? This is what I want to communicate. Or you can walk in the door of language. You can step into the poem. You might have an image. You might have a phrase, and you might have a series of words that simply feels like it needs to be put down on the page. And then that piece of language often calls up another piece of language. And then you don't begin, it's a lot different than a lot of people begin writing an essay, for example, with an outline. To me, I'm not really writing a poem in terms of this is going to be a poem about Barney Beagle, and I'm going to express my joy when she was a puppy or something like that. No, I'll just begin with a piece of language normally.
Kind of let it lead you, let the poem lead you.
Right, with the words, the images. Sometimes it's just simply the sound and the rhythm of a line. You know how sometimes you'll listen to a song and music will just put you in a mood and then carry your thoughts, and sometimes you'll sit there and you go, well, why am I thinking about this thing? And then you'll backtrack your thoughts several sentences back. You go, oh, that's right, because I had this song on, and then it led to this, and it led to this thought, and that led to that thought. It's similar. It's not exact, but it's similar in a poem.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. How would you describe your poetry to somebody who has never read it?
Well, a friend of mine showed me they did some sort of, I guess it was AI generated, and it was really interesting when they asked about my poetry. And, some of it was spot on, but really, as a lot of things happen with AI, a lot of it ended up becoming gibberish, and it sounded more sophisticated than it actually was. But one of the things that did come up there, which I would hold forth, is there's a sense of mystical engagement.
I agree.
With everything that I write.
Yes.
And that really, it's the sense of the reciprocal nature. And this I'm leaving that AI thing completely now, but it really is the sense of the reciprocal nature of how all of us interact, and everything is interdependent with everything else. So that's the first thing if somebody asks me. But it's also, is that beautiful piece you read about my work, it's also the sense of an animated universe, an animated natural environment that is present. Now, sometimes I'll write a poem that's very accessible, that's very available to an audience, that's the core, the mystical, natural, animated, almost pantheistic sense of the universe. Sometimes I'll write a poem that's very accessible, and other times I'll have to approach that with work that's more challenging, that perhaps doesn't tell a story. There's a story, even though there's a lot of leaps. There's a story in the poem that I read. There's a narrative thread.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll leave that behind for the sake of what the poem is demanding, and I won't engage narrative or story at all.
So has that always been your writing style, or is that something that you developed?
I think it's always been. I would have to really think back, but I don't remember ever writing in a different way. You can't help but express who and what you are. Maybe it's deepened as I've changed and matured over the years.
Experienced life.
But I think the same core has always probably been there.
So has writing always been important to you?
Oh, yeah. I remember writing and your listeners can't hear this because it's see this because it's a podcast, but I'll do air quotes. I wrote a novel when I was 9 or 10 years old.
Oh, that's young. That's ambitious.
Yeah, and I even illustrated it. It was about a family of little hamsters. We had in school, we had a hamster that we were taking care of. And I wrote my first poem when I was 12. I don't know, there was something about language and the sense of being a writer that always called me. And I just felt that it was a way for me to engage the world and feel part of it. And in looking back, I didn't think these thoughts when I was 10, but a way to touch a deeper part of myself that wasn't available through other means, cultural means in terms of growing up. So
I feel everything so deeply. So when I write a poem, I want the person reading it to almost feel my emotions because it's a way to express myself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's just so much easier for me to write it rather than to say it.
Right.
So
in fact, when I talk, like in a podcast, I always want to revise things. I'm so used to being a reviser. And I'm always thinking about language and the perfect way. So writing it's always been a more comfortable vehicle for me.
Sure.
As well, because I know I can revise it.
So when did you think, hey, I'm going to do this for a living?
Well, that's a tricky concept, the idea of a living, because you rarely make a living as a poet. I made my living as a professor,
right.
as you know. But I mean, really what you're asking, and I understand the question, but I wanted to just clarify that for our listeners. When did I get serious and think I want to pursue this as a vocation? I'd say I remember it was in college, somewhere probably when I was maybe 20 years old. I kept writing poems and taking creative writing classes. And, I thought this would be nice to experiment and see where it goes. But I never really felt until 20, 21, 22, hey, this is something I need, like the air we breathe. Really just seemed like something I had to keep doing at that point.
So I feel like I should know this, but what's your degree in? Is it English?
My doctorate's in English, yeah.
Doctorate's in English, okay. Where did you go to school?
Well, I did my undergraduate IU Bloomington,
and
then my master's at Colorado State University, and then my doctorate at SUNY State University of New York, Albany.
So do you have a work that you're particularly proud of?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think most writers, the most recent things you're writing is what you are most engaged with. And then you move on. It's not like you discard them.
All your children.
Yeah, actually, really. I can look back. I can look back at my early books and still find value in them. I don't sit there and go, oh. And they're interesting as a chronology of who and what I am and who and what I was. But I'd say right now, the two most recent books, the Hound Dog book, of course, the one we're talking about, and I the same year, 2023, I had a book appear called To Sleep in the Horse's Belly, My Greek Poets and the Aegean Inside Me. And it's about my Greek ancestry and about my Greek family. Modern and contemporary Greek poets, it's about them, poems about them. These poets who are kind of invisible now. And so that's an important book to me because I trace my ancestry and the kinship I feel with my family and with these poets who feel like family. I'm really still, even though the book's been published, I'm still engaged with that book. It's a favorite because it feels like it's such a gift back. It's not really about me in terms of the gesture of the book, the impetus of the book. It's really about where I came from. In fact, it even includes 20 pages of these remarkable ancestral photos of my immigrant family.
Oh, that's great.
And I look at their eyes, and I think they could never. One side of the family had to travel over a mountain pass and relocate to another part of Greece just to make a living.
Yeah.
They could never have conceived of the life that they gave me.
Right.
And that I came through them, genetically, but also spiritually. And I look in their eyes and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, you had dreams for this, that, or the other, but you never could have dreamed the life that I'm living.
Absolutely.
So that's the gift of that book.
Uh-huh.
I use the word gift really intentionally. I don't know. Do you know Lewis Hyde's remarkable book called The Gift?
I know the title. I wouldn't have been able to tell you the author.
It's an incredible book, and it's about art and anthropology and living one's life in terms of tracing it back to a gift-giving culture.
Okay.
And that it's not a commodity, right? And so too, like our writing, my writing is not a commodity. I go, oh, look, I'm accumulating a bank account of books.
Right.
It's you open yourself up to, if this makes the least bit of sense, you open yourself up to something larger and you give that back to the universe in such a way that you're engaging with it in a way that diminishes the ego investment more and more.
Sure.
Does that make the least bit of sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Absolutely.
So I think because that book was so grounded in the gift I'm giving to these poets who I never met,
right,
but who grieved me that many of them were forgotten, neglected, and my family. And of course, the Hound Dog book speaks for itself. It's important to me because of my enduring love of hound dogs.
Yes. I can't wait to read the rest of it. So I want to pivot again. What is your writing process like? You said you do the marathon and then you revise. Is that the standard for you?
I'm writing all the time, even in my head. I'm thinking, I'm looking at the world. In fact, sometimes I'll feel a poem come on me. I'll be in the middle of my walk, right? Miles from my house. And my new thing is to speak into my phone and save a line here, there. I used to always carry pencil and paper. So I write just about every day. I make it joyous. I think that's an important thing to talk about with the process. I don't sit there and roll up my sleeves. It's time to get to work. I better write a poem. Because, when you approach it that way, you approach it, I guess, like anything in the world, with tension. It's contractive then. You're gripping in a way. And so my process is, but it's also not cavalier. It's not like, hey, first thought, best thought.
Right.
but it's much more like I'm going to sit, I'm going to play with language. Clifford Geertz, the anthropologist, has a wonderful term called deep play. And I think in many ways I'm playing. Because if you approach the process that way, you never know what's going to come up. The best poems for me are the poems that surprise me in some way. They reveal something I could never have planned. They say something that I thought, I have been thinking that, but I didn't quite articulate that to myself.
So I've been reading through The Theory and Function of Mangoes and Kingdom of Throat-Stuck Luck. I feel like these have your stamp. This has your stamp, but I feel like they read different. Like maybe that's what you're playing with the language, and so it's coming out differently in all of your titles. It's not quite the same.
They're not. They're really very different books. You're a very perceptive reader in that regard. Now, The Theory and Function of Mangoes.
Did you live in India for a while?
It was several months. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very visual. Yeah, a lot of imagery.
I have two books about my wife and my experiences in India, our experiences there, The Theory and Function of Mangoes and Gold Carp. It's all one non-punctuated phrase, gold carp, jackfruit mirrors, so that the words are mirroring one. And that book has the India poems have more elements of narrative to them, more elements of story, although I branch off and move off from story and obviously using the other powers of poems, imagery and sound and all of that. But narrative is central in some ways to the India books. But in Kingdom of Throat-Stuck Luck, there's very little narrative. Kingdom of Throat-Stuck Luck is one of the volumes of this ongoing project I've been working on for more than 20 years called the Bone Sutras. And in the Bone Sutras, it's a series of books where the poems are written in couplets, 2-line stanzas. I'm really foregrounding the binary as a way to dissolve the binary. That I'm having 2-line stanzas as a way for us to try to get past binary or dualistic thinking. Because the imagery that comes through in the Bone Sutras moves well beyond dualistic thinking. In the series of books, the Bone Sutras, of which Kingdom of Throat-Stuck Luck is the first, I'm really working more on a spiritual level, trying to bring in a lot of images that at some points are jarring and extraordinarily surprising, to derail our expectations of what might come. There's a vague hint of a narrative. There's a speaker throughout all the Bone Sutra books that has lived many lives.
Okay.
And I'm not chronicling my own sense of past lives or anything like that, but this speaker has lived many existences. And so there's that hint of a narrative, but it's just a hint. So they really are very different books. Now, the Hound Dog book is more narrative even than The Theory and Function of Mangoes.
That's what I was,
Yeah, so,
hearing.
I think this is a great question, Meg, because a lot of times we get locked in, even in our lives, don't we? Who and what we think we are, or who and what we think we should be. We're performing, right? We're, and I don't say that, complimentary. in a complimentary way. We're performing and holding on to some sense of who and what we are, but isn't who and what we are always changing and evolving? So I don't limit myself. I don't go, well, this is a George Kalamaras poem here, and so I've got to write this way. If something comes out and it doesn't sound like me, right? Again, I'm doing air quotes here, doesn't sound like me, it's like, isn't that interesting? Let me roll with that. Let me run with it and see where it leads.
So I want to talk about the cover art on your books because they're beautiful books. Do you have input into the cover art? Somebody picked that for you?
I have been so fortunate, Meg. I've always had input. Most of the art on the covers I have suggested.
Oh,
and that's
fantastic.
And on the Mangoes book, that's an old photograph that I really loved, and the publisher went with it, and that I have a dear friend. He's left the body now, Alvaro Cardona Hine. He was a poet and a painter and a musical composer, and his paintings are incredible. And several of my books have his paintings on the cover, including Kingdom of Throat Stuck Luck.
That is a very pretty picture.
That's a painting by Alvaro. So I've been really fortunate to have beautiful covers on my books.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like you need to frame them. I think I said that to another author. I feel like they need to be framed and like hanging on the wall so you can just appreciate them. You know, they're so pretty. So looking back on your writing journey, would you do anything different to becoming the writer you are today?
That's a great question. I think I'm going to answer it in two ways. First, no, because I believe in, the George Bailey theory and the film It's a Wonderful Life. You change one thing and
domino effect.
I love where my writing is now. I love my process. So in that sort of cosmic way, I don't think I would change anything. But in a practical way, if there would not be a snowball effect or domino effect, as you just said, I would have lightened up years earlier. and I don't mean, again, like first thought, best thought, but I would not have been so uptight. I mean, I in the early days, I'd write a poem, and if it was any good, I'd go, maybe I am a poet. And if it was not very good, I'd go, who am I fooling? I'm not a poet. And that's a goofy way to approach a practice. Writing is a practice. I mean, if you sit to jog, or you go to jog, you don't go, maybe I am a good jogger, or maybe I'm not a good jogger, right? Or if you sit to meditate, you don't sit there and go, I'm a good meditator, or I'm a bad meditator. We're trying to be present. And if we're continually judging ourselves, that doesn't mean we lessen our standards, but we try to approach, I would try to just be lighter about it and not look at it in such a severe way where I was judging my self-worth based on a poem.
Sure, absolutely. I love that. So what is one of the best ways that somebody can improve their writing skills from your perspective?
I'm going to sound like an old fogey here because I used to think my teachers were like, did they get this out of a cliched handbook? Because they all said the same thing, but it's true. You've got to read a lot. You have to, and I'll say some other things, but I want to begin with reading because, we will realize we're engaged when we're writing. We're engaged with lots of this tradition, that we're stepping into this tradition and we're bringing our little voice into this larger voice. And if you don't know what's been written, and if you don't know how people are writing, you can't engage that very well. So that's the primary thing. The other reason reading is so important is it's inspirational. You can read something and go, you can be moved and go, oh my goodness, the hairs on the back of your neck are standing up. And you have, goosebumps on your arms, and that can bring you into a space where you're more receptive to writing something that's true and meaningful. So I think, the best advice would be that, read, but also write. a lot of times, as writers, especially in the beginning, we wait for inspiration. What's that? I cultivate inspiration, if there is such a thing. I don't sit there and go, I'm really feeling inspired, I'll think I'll write. If you do that, you'll never write.
Yeah.
I'll set little like that ekphrastic poem I talked to you about.
Yeah.
I'll set, I didn't know what I was going to write. I was sitting on the sofa with Bootsy that night in front of the fireplace, and I thought, really feel like writing. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I thought, I got those great photos. Let me just play around for a little bit and see what happens.
What about writers who aren't great editors? I'm not always perfect with my punctuation. And I had she was a very kind editor. She returned one of my poems to me and said, she was very, very nice, but she told me I needed to watch my punctuation and I needed to do a better job. So how can are there any resources for writers who can sharpen those skills to become a better writer as well?
First, I want to preface this by saying how important punctuation really is. And it's not just in terms of being correct. There's a wonderful poem by the poet James Wright called A Blessing. The speaker in the poem and his companion get out of the car and look at these two ponies out in a field. And there's a line in the poem, we step over the barbed wire into the pasture where they have been grazing all day, alone. Now that is technically grammatically incorrect. You would say where they have been grazing all day alone. Now that's using punctuation for the effect. I mean, even the visual comma is separating one word from another, which is really accentuating that sense of solitude and aloneness. And so punctuation is incredibly important in that regard. And I want to say it's not simply for this idea of correctness and say the grammatical police, the grammar police.
Sure.
But there are all kinds of resources out there, especially now with the internet. Oh my goodness, when I'm editing a book, and even if I have questions, there'll be a complex sentence, I'll look at it and I'll think, boy, there's something about this that isn't quite right. I better look this up. So there's all kinds of resources on the internet. We tend to get scared by it. Right? Because we've been corrected. We've been told we've been wrong. Right. And so we want to I better not do that. Or I'm not sure what I'm doing, so I'm a little scared. I better not risk it. But if we develop a different relationship with grammar and punctuation, which is why I gave you that example in that poem, then we can look at it as a friend. And, how is it that this is going to enhance our work rather than be something that's going to be a drag on it?
Absolutely. So do you have any favorite resources new writers should be aware of?
I think approaching our writing with a spirit of generosity is always the best way. So I always, when I was teaching, I always encouraged my students to attend poetry readings, even if they were not reading, even if it wasn't like an open reading where they were going to pull out this poem and share it with people. That you should, as a poet, you should be engaged in a very active way with the community, because you're going to learn from that, but you're also going to meet other writers. You're going to find commonality. You're going to be working towards something together, right? Something that you share in common. That vibration is going to accrete and gather energy around it. So, one of the things that I think is really important resource for people is to attend local poetry readings.
Sure. And
there are poetry readings still at PFW. There are many venues around, several venues around the city, Fort Wayne, where people are reading their poems publicly. And I would say just engage with that, meet people. And the other thing I would suggest, Meg, is forming a poetry group.
Oh, okay.
Finding some people, our culture is not set up to support poets. Our culture, in fact, we're told that it's a hobby.
Yeah.
We're told that everything else in the world is important except the poem that we're writing. We need to find relationships with people that foster that sense that we're doing something great together. So having a poetry group where you meet every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, and you share your work with 5, 6 people, and you offer appreciations and you offer suggestions on a poem that you might bring to the group is extraordinarily helpful, not just for the poem that you may be bringing to the group,
right,
but it's extraordinarily helpful because of what you're going to learn in the commentary about other people's poems, or the commentary that you're going to come up with that you didn't plan. You're having a reaction to somebody's poem, and then you bring those kinds of insights into your own writing process when you're home by yourself. So community, I would say, is the important element of resource, finding community and not isolating oneself.
So what's next, George? Do you have anything planned for your writing?
I'm always working on several book projects at one time. That's just that's the kind of writer I am. I'm just kind of working on several different things, because then if something feels like it's not happening in the ways that I want it to, I can easily move to a book project. So I have a few book projects that are in the hopper. Super excited about.
Okay. So I'm going to move into some fun questions.
Well, these were fun.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to rephrase the first fun question a little bit, because I said, if you didn't write for a living, what would you do? But we kind of hit on that a little earlier. So if you hadn't been a professor for a living, what would you have done?
Well, this is an interesting question. Sometimes my friends and I will talk about this. I think I would have gone into like wildlife management or wildlife biology. It would be interesting to me to be out in the field, studying animals, living off the land a little bit, learning about the environment. So I think I would have gone into wildlife management somehow.
That sounds great. I always think it would have been really neat to be the people that work in the state parks, like out in Glacier National, that with the hats and what do they call those people?
Forest rangers?
Forest rangers, thank you. Yeah, that would have been a great job. Being out in nature all day long, awesome. So how do you celebrate when you finish a book?
I might take a day off. Well, first, it's hard to know when I've finished a book, but when I think it's really there, because, I'm an incessant reviser, but when I think it's really there and there's no more intense work to do on it, I might change a line or two, but I don't have any special ritual. It's not like, I go out to dinner or something like that. I might take a little time off from starting a new project. But the greatest celebration for me is that I'm free to move into my other projects, to my other books. So it's super exciting when I finish a book because I've got something else in the hopper.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, let me go over here, and now I can engage this in the beginning stages, because the beginning stages are, there's a lot of latitude. There's a lot more play involved at that point.
So it sounds like you're always writing.
I'm always writing.
Always writing.
Always writing.
Okay. I know you said you were in India with the theory and function of mangoes. Did you travel there to write the book, or you just happened to be there and you wrote a book about your time?
I had a research grant. I had written a scholarly book, The Rhetoric of Silence. And I've been interested in the Hindu yogic tradition forever. And so I always wanted to go to India. And so I got a research grant from the Indo-U.S. Subcommission on Education and Culture to go there for some months and study the culture and the spiritual practices firsthand. So I spent a lot of time in various ashrams interviewing sadhus, who are the Hindu holy men and women, did research in libraries. I had an office. They gave me office space at 2 different universities when I traveled around India. So it wasn't like, hey, let's go on vacation to India. I actually had a purpose to go there.
If you could spend the day with one popular author, who would it be?
Myself? No, I'm joking. I've spent so many days with authors, maybe not popular authors, but poets. So that's a hard thing.
Sure.
Does the person have to be living?
No.
Oh, well, then that's easier. That's an easier question for me. I think there's a writer whose work I adore, Gaston Bachelard, a French philosopher, writer, and he wrote a series of incredible books, The Psychoanalysis of Fire, my favorite, The Poetics of Space. I'd love to spend a day with him.
When was he popular? When was he around?
I think it was like 1920s maybe.
Okay, so
give or take, like 1920s through. I think he left the body in the 60s sometime.
What is your favorite book? Is that your favorite book?
No.
Okay, what's your favorite book?
It's one of my favorite books. Favorite book, period, or favorite book of poetry?
Both. Let's just say.
If I was on an island, well, my favorite book, my favorite book is Autobiography by Paramahansa Yogananda. It's an incredible book of firsthand experiences, speaking of India, firsthand experiences of practice of meditation. That book has meant the world to me since I was a teenager. But I'd say poetry books, and that's my favorite book. But, island material, if I had to have, 3-4 books with me, definitely Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, the original edition.
Okay.
He revised it a little bit. Here I am talking about revision, but he revised it a little bit. In the when I taught that book, I always taught the original edition.
I'll have to go look at it.
It's a little more intense. I'm a big fan of Asian poetry, particularly the classical Chinese poets, and there's a wonderful anthology, hundreds of pages, called Sunflower Splendor, and that's a wonderful book of Chinese classical poetry. One of my other favorite poets is a Peruvian poet, Cesar Vallejo, and my favorite book of his is The Complete Posthumous Poems, although there's several translated by Clayton Eshelman. Yeah, those would be the 4 books I'd have with me on an island.
On an island? Yes. All right.
And hopefully they wouldn't get soggy and
no
rain-soaked. And right.
Just keep them dry.
Because I always laugh about that when we talk about what records or CDs would you have on an island. Well, how are you going to have electricity?
How are you going to play them? That's right. That's right. It's not going to work. Well, thank you, George, for joining us on Pages and Voices. It's been delightful to have you here.
Oh, it's been a blast. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so thrilled and I'm really honored. It's wonderful to talk about my greatest loves, poetry and hound dogs. So thanks very much, Meg. This has been great.
And thank you to those who listened in. Stay tuned for more authors on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. Until next time. I'm Meg Bell, your host of the ACPL Local Author Podcast, brought to you by the Allen County Public Library. If you enjoyed this podcast, please show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends and family. Your support means everything to us.